May I have your attention, please? Thank you very much to everyone for coming tonight. Before we do anything else, I would like to invite you to please turn off your cell phones before we get started. Friendly reminder. And also to introduce myself, my name is Nicole Malloy. I'm the Director of Multicultural Outreach in Alumni Relations here at Penn. And this event is co-sponsored by the Annenberg School. So thank you to the Annenberg School for helping to make this happen. We are here to have a conversation with Dr. David Gleason, and you will hear a little bit more about him in a second. But first, a little bit about the Diversity Alliance Speaker Series. These events are here to introduce the Penn community to the amazing accomplishments of our diverse alumni here at Penn. And I wanted to also introduce Chris Sample, who's right there in the back. Please wave, Chris. Hello, Chris. Hello. You'll recognize that face as the smaller, much smaller face that's on the flyer directly in front of you. That's him. That's Chris Sample. So he's our next speaker. So please come back in October to hear all about fighting crime together, government and community partnerships. And he is the Director of Community and Governmental Relations in Philadelphia's District Attorney's Office. So that will be incredibly interesting, so please come back for that. And without further ado, pleased to introduce Dr. David Gleason. And you have his bio in front of you, but very briefly I'll touch on a few elements of it. David Gleason is the Senior Vice President and Strategy Director at Publicis New York, one of the world's largest advertising and media services conglomerates, where he works with, that's it right there, where he works with industry giants Procter & Gamble and Nestle, among others. Prior to Publicis, David spent time at advertising leader Ogilvy Mather. He spent several years at MTV Networks, where after working with TV Land and Nickelodeon, he became Vice President of Brand and Consumer Strategy, Spike TV. As an undergraduate here at Penn, he majored in finance at the Wharton School and was active in the Philomathean Society. And he went on to earn both a master's degree and a doctorate right here in communications from the Annenberg School. His dissertation, Becoming Dominant, Shifting Control and the Creation of Culture in Provincetown, Massachusetts, was an examination of the shifting culture of Provincetown, Mass, and how class, sexual orientation, and the tourist economy were articulated in media and interpersonal communication.
That's a good description.
Pretty impressive. Well, you know his own title. It's a very good description. So please help me to welcome Dr. David Gleason. Thank you so much. So we start all of these events with what connects all of our speakers to you and to one another, which is the University of Pennsylvania. So why don't you tell us what brought you here to Penn as an undergrad?
Penn as an undergrad. First of all, I got to say, like, this is a little bit of a trip, like being on, first on this side of those chairs. I spent so many years in one of those chairs, and it's a little anxiety producing. And when I got off the train, I was thinking, God, I wonder if White Dog's still around. It's like, the White Dog sat at the bar, and then I realized it was 20 years ago that I was a waiter there. So I'm having like all these kind of like fun memories about Penn from my undergrad and from my grad days. But how did I get to Penn? I was thinking about that on the train right down, and it was actually kind of funny. I mean, I had from my family, my parents' generation was the first generation to go to college, and they were, I guess probably many people that generation, they had very specific courses of study to do what they wanted to do. So my mother wanted to become a teacher, so she took education, and my father was an engineering student, so he became an engineer. And I was thinking, well, I don't want to do either of those things. I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer. It's like, what do I want to do? Like, well, business. Maybe people are in business. I'll do some business stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be a business person. Had no idea what that meant. Seemed kind of like a good idea. And I went into my school library and looked up the rankings of business schools, and Wharton was at the top. And I figured, well, that seems like I might try that. I was living in the South at the time and wanted to get out, so I knew I wanted to be above the Mason-Dixon line. And then I also had never lived in an urban setting, so I figured an urban setting would be kind of good. And luckily, Wharton combined both of those two requirements for me, and I came here, and I had no idea what I was getting into. Had an amazing time, and had, I think probably like a lot of you guys, the experience here, especially in the first 4 years, completely threw me for a loop and opened up like whole new avenues of possibility of like what I could do and what I could be, and that vague sense of wanting to be in business became a lot more tighter. I actually started questioning whether even that was the road that I wanted to take, and sort of exposing myself to a lot of different things that I never thought I'd be interested in before, like art history or French history, French grammar from like the 16th century. All these amazing and wonderful things that are possible here. And that was, I guess, the kind of the kickoff to the rest of my life.
So before we get to the rest of your life, tell us what steered you toward communications after you did all this academic exploration, and then once you decided that, what kept you here at Penn?
First time I took a communication course, and the only communication course I took as an undergrad was my senior year, and again, talked about another revelatory and kind of life-changing course. It was with Larry Gross, who used to teach here, and it was called Sexual Minorities in the Media. And it seems kind of obvious now, but at the time, taking that course and kind of realizing how culture constructs communication and communication around people and communication around cultural difference was a revelation. And the realization that things didn't always have to be the way they are today. Things always weren't that way in the past, and things don't need to be that way in the future was a big sort of profound moment for me. And with what he and that course and some of the work that that I was doing here as an undergrad brought me back to grad school to try to explore that a little bit further.
And tell us a little bit about your graduate work here and how you chose the topics you chose.
Well, after undergrad, I did what kind of most people in any good Wharton student would do. I applied to consulting and banking firms, and landed in a consulting gig, which was pretty great. I mean, it was a small boutique strategy firm. Kind of the end of graduated in the 90s, it was kind of like the hangover from the go-go 80s, the early 90s. Worked for clients like Fidelity, the state oil company of Norway, and basically we're doing like market entry strategies, and also for Fidelity helping them figure out if their branch network was actually contributing profit to them or not, because it was pretty expensive. So kind of big corporate strategy type things. Loved the analytics. The industries that I was working with probably were not as exciting. I knew that I loved entertainment, I loved pop culture, and some of the coursework that I'd taken here whetted my appetite to go a bit deeper into the mass communication, pop culture space, and so that's when I came back with an eye towards possibly going into academia or maybe switching and moving more into a communications field. So.
Excuse me. So many here are interested in how you got your foot in the door in the television industry. So why don't you take us from leaving Penn and getting into Spike TV?
Another story. One of the joys of the dissertation process that I had is by doing an ethnography, I got to go and kind of live in situ. And since my topic was about Provincetown, I spent about a year and a half living at the tip of Cape Cod, which was phenomenal for about 6 months out of the year. The other 6 months, when you don't have a car and you're riding your bicycle in the rain in the middle of a nor'easter, is a little tougher. And so when I was finishing my dissertation, I'd already done all the work, and I was in the process of sort of coding and writing, and I was thinking about what I really wanted to do with my life. And I had I had people who I'd been in grad school with, and also in the Ph.D. program, who were taking various different paths. And I was thinking, I could go the academic path, which was amazing, and I've got, actually people like Catherine Sender, who's here right now, she and I were talking about that. Had someone in my master's program named Tanya Giles, who had taken a different path after her master's. She wanted to go out and do a little bit of work in the entertainment business. And she had this job, which I'd never heard of, called entertainment research. And I had no idea that the job even existed. And what it is, essentially, is it's being, for large entertainment companies, being the voice of the consumer, trying to go out and figure out what they like, what they don't like, what shows are they watching, what aren't they watching, taking stuff, pilots that we're developing, the networks we're developing, and testing those, and trying to at least kind of weed out the stinkers, and try to up your hit rate a little bit, and then understand how people think about your brand and how people are thinking about what you might want to be doing. And it sounded kind of interesting. And she passed. As I was graduating, there was a job that was available in her group. She worked for, at that time, for TV Land, and I started off at Nickelodeon, and passed my resume along. And the person who she passed the resume along, she tells this story how she saw my resume and she's like, oh, no way, no fit, nothing, but he seems really kind of interesting, and it would be fun to at least take him out to lunch and chat about it. So we ended up going out having lunch, and ended up landing the job and started off testing shows at Nickelodeon. First show I ever tested was SpongeBob, which I think some of you have heard of, but I still have the memo in my desk drawer. Like the first line is, if kids react, if the real audiences react the way these kids react, we've got a hit on our hands. So that was nice. So I worked from show testing, which is a pretty small area, to eventually working my way through positions, and ended up running all of research and consumer insights for Spike TV as it was launched. And Spike TV, you guys probably know, is kind of very like guy, Bachelor mentality, James Bond, Star Wars, Ultimate Fighting. But they were launching the network around, and they needed a head of research. Moved over there. It's all part of the same company, and was there for about 5 years. So all total, MTV Networks about 8 years.
While you were there, what did you most enjoy, and what did you least expect?
I would say the thing I most enjoyed, and it's the thing that I love about advertising right now, is companies like that, especially in media and entertainment and advertising, it's a really great combination of creativity and analytics. Like you don't really think of the two going hand in hand, but and the roles that I've always had have been kind of playing on both sides of that. Like research is a highly kind of analytic space, but you're working with people who are really highly creative, and so you're trying to think, you've got this creative product that you're trying to help guide so that people will be more interested in it, so people will actually watch your channel, or people will be interested in your ads so you can sell your clients' products. And navigating that balance between creativity and analytics is probably the best thing about that area, at least for me.
And what you least expected?
Least expected. I don't know. Because I had so few expectations going in. The first thing that I realized when I got in was, especially coming out of a Ph.D. program, that what they call research and what we call research are two entirely different things. I spent 1.5 years in one small town doing my dissertation, writing field notes every single day. Went through 70 years of local newspapers and mining all kinds of census data. You wouldn't even do that for, you would never do something like that for in a corporate place. So I had to kind of check my research absolutism at the door, and at least try to do the things that, given the time frames and given the questions that we needed to ask, at least get as close to purity as we could without spending 1.5 years working on one show.
And so from there, what motivated you to switch gears and move from television into a major advertising firm like Ogilvy and Mather?
I was at MTV Networks for 8 years, and it was amazing. It's a great place. Still have a lot of people there, and I still keep in touch with the folks there. But at a certain point, I was kind of looking at I was looking at my my world and my career, and I was had it down. I knew what I was doing. There wasn't really, quite frankly, a lot of space above me to move. And I had a real strong interest in, I was getting more and more interested in brand strategy, and basically how you organize what you want to be to other people, how you want your brand to look, and how you want it to feel, how you also want to go to market, how you develop marketing campaigns. And on the entertainment side, because most of the marketing is done on air, meaning you create promotions for your ads because you're communicating to the people who are actually using your product. There wasn't a lot of chance of working in very large, multi-million-dollar advertising campaigns, and I wanted to get a bit deeper into that. So I started looking into the advertising world, and again, I kind of had a sense of how it works, just because part of my job was to go and try to sell our networks to the advertisers and kind of talk to them about, this is at Spike, talk to them about the value of the mail market. So I've been into a lot of the advertising agencies, but most of them were media buyers, which is a different kind of side than what I do. I started having conversations with some of the creative agencies because I knew that I liked this merger of creativity and analytics, so I wanted to be at the creative agency side, not necessarily on the more heavily analytic media side. And just started having conversations, and I found that there's this role, which is surprisingly similar to media research. It's called strategy and planning, account planning, traditional account planning in the advertising world. And kind of fell into that, and I've been doing that for about 2 years, and it's great. I've been working on, like right now, working on a bunch of P&G brands, primarily Vicks, like Nyquil, Dayquil. You'll see Thermacare, which P&G just sold, but it has a special place in my heart. Thermacare are these kind of weird little heat wraps. They look like bandages or diapers. They're really an ugly, ugly product, but they're pretty miraculous. Like if you guys, if anyone has bad back and you need to travel, wear those things. They're great. But I'll show you an example a little bit later of some fun that we had with that. And then also working on something which is not here. It's a West Coast launch. Nestle and Jamba Juice have done a joint venture to make smoothies in the bottle, so you can get Jamba Juice in the bottle. And I don't know, do they have Jamba Juice here? Okay. Out west, it's huge. Like every corner, you've got it, and it's like a huge, it's a really big deal. So if you ever go out west, look in the supermarket, see the Jamba Juice, and that's awesome.
And we'll think of you.
Yeah, think of me.
So before we take a look at some of the work you brought for us, let's establish some context and do a little advertising 101 for the benefit of the audience. So first, how would you define advertising and its purpose, especially in the modern day?
Advertising, first and foremost, people will talk around and talk about the big, creating culture and all that stuff. It's not really that. You're selling people's products. People hire us to sell, to move stuff off the shelves and to also, build their image, essentially. So it's corporations will come to us for image making or to launch products or to basically to develop materials and campaigns that will reach people in kind of language they understand, tonality that fits them and fits the brand in a way that can motivate them to know and know about the products and buy the products. And
so what, especially to you, the professional, would distinguish good advertising from bad advertising?
Good advertising. I would say good advertising at its best is true to the kind of the core essence of what the the brand and the company is. And companies are just they're groups of people, and a lot of them have stories, and a lot of them develop cultures, and a lot of them have certain ways that they like to behave in the world. And the companies I think that do best are remain true to that, and remain true to that sense of self. So the advertising has to fit that, and advertising has to, for the given product, has to deliver or tweak or refer to some sort of truth or something that's going to resonate with the people, something that either gives them a lot of joy, something that makes them nervous, something that will reach them in some kind of emotional way. Because ultimately, some decisions are analytic, but a lot of this is really, a lot of purchases are emotional. Because most people, 90% of the stuff that's out there, people don't really need. So you can talk on both sides of whether that's good or not, that we actually are trying to force that on people, but some people find lots of joy in things, so that's fine. So you're trying to, usually it's more of an emotional as opposed to rational argument. And then increasingly now, things used to be, I don't know if you guys watch Mad Men, things, we look back there and like we always get a big chuckle out of it, because back then you had 3 networks, and you had newspapers, you had magazines, and you had a little bit of radio. And so the whole thing was about the idea, it wasn't necessarily how it was deployed. One of the biggest challenges, I think this is one of the directions we can talk about now, is with the digitalization of a lot of media and the proliferation of different ways that you can get it, through your iPhone, through your BlackBerry, satellite radio, TiVo, you can skip through you can skip through commercials now. It makes the world a lot more complex. And so when we talk about good advertising, I also say to talk about good advertising campaigns. And the campaigns are things that are going to be reflective of the way that people are living their lives and talking to them in a way that not only resonates with them sort of creatively and emotionally, but also fits into the lives they're living in a way that makes sense. I mean, the best advertising that I see is when stuff is like, oh, okay, I get it, they get me. I may or may not like the product, I may or may, not like the fact that they found me where I am, but at least they know enough to figure that stuff out.
So this would be, now that we know what we're going to see, because of course we're going to see examples of wonderful advertising, let's take a look at some of your work.
Yeah, well, I'll let you be the judge if it's wonderful or not. Some of these are accounts that I work on, some are not. Some are more traditional than others. And the first stuff I'm going to show you is from Citibank. We got that account, the global account, last year, and I think you'll probably recognize some of the ads. These are traditional 30 and 60-second spots, something that you would typically see on television, but they're part of a broader campaign that's about telling us your story. And I think one of the major shifts that's happened in the advertising world from the days of Donald Draper back in the 60s is that it's no longer a one-way communication. You're soliciting people's feedback, and I think, again, some of the best brands listen to what their consumers say and actually adjust the advertising based upon that. This is part of a broader campaign that's around the idea of storytelling, and it comes from the knowledge that it's not so much, people don't want to know when you're dealing with a bank, like percentage rates and functionality and all that. It's like, what is finance and what is financial security and what do credit cards, especially these are for the credit cards, what do the credit cards allow you to do? They allow you to live your life. And I don't know if sometimes you guys look at the, I do this sometimes because I'm just kind of a geek, but I'll like, at the end of the year when you get that statement of your credit card, and first of all, after the shock of like how much money you spent on ridiculous stuff, it's almost like a photo album where you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that trip. That was a lot of fun. Like, oh god, that was a bad night. You know. And so this is about, this campaign is really about the stories that you can tell about the life you're able to lead through with the Citi card. And I'll explain a little bit later what the stuff is. That's the logo, obviously. Hopefully the volume will be okay.
So I asked my dad where he wanted to go for his 60th birthday.
We just left the National Theater.
Norway, he said. The land of our ancestors. We drank a pint at Ibsen's favorite pub. We sampled the local fare. We saw the fjords.
I feel like yodeling. Do they yodel?
We got new sweaters.
All right.
We bonded. It was the trip of a lifetime, Dad said. Until we went to the Hall of Records to trace our family tree. And discovered we were actually Swedish.
2 tickets to Stockholm, please. Let's go. From visiting old worlds to making new discoveries. Whatever your story is, your Citi card can help you write it. Because Citi never sleeps.
Yeah, so that's one. Thank you. I had nothing to do with that ad, but thank you anyway. And here's another one, same kind of vein. And again, these are like 95% of the way done. They get finished in post-production, and so like the sound is a little bit off, but you'll get to see it.
This is the story of giving my mom what she really wants for the holidays. I don't know if she was more surprised at what I got.
Let me look at you.
Or how good I looked in it. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't go with that crystal turtle.
Whatever your story is, your Citi card can help you write it. Because Citi never sleeps.
So again, you see, it's all about, it's emotion, it's not analytics. I was getting a little misty. And it's about the end benefit. It's not about the functionality of the actual card. I mean, who cares if it's, it used to always say like more available in more places. Like, who cares if it's available in 85 or 90% of the places? That's not really why you get a card. It's it's to enable other stuff. So the next one I think is going to be something true to everyone's heart. Pepto-Bismol. how do you get emotional with Pepto-Bismol? Especially, delicate product, delicate situation, but it's something that we had quite a bit of fun with. And so let the image sort of speak with itself. This is something. This is a non-traditional. I mean, this is not a 30-second spot. These are. This is part of the campaign that we did. We did TV spots and we did print ads and everything. But the whole idea was that there are times, and there are usually unfortunate times, when sometimes you can't always plan where you need to go. And for those times, there's Pepto-Bismol. Upset stomachs happen everywhere. And it's tapping into, if the first one is tapping into sort of what the emotional feelings you have, like when, for dream trips or doing something really nice for your family. This one's tapping into panic, basically. So we set up. So this was really fun. We set up toilets all around New York in various and sundry places. Brooklyn Bridge, on the commute while you're walking there, places that are not, where toilets are either far away or places you don't really want to visit. Just to remind people that we're there, give people a little bit of a chuckle, and also say, better stock up. You never really know. And we also did this. This is another part of it. When we talk about the variety of different places you can talk. To
Oh,
people.
that's okay.
We're always looking for new places and unexpected places to talk to people. Because with the proliferation of ways to talk to people and proliferation of messages that people are bombarded with, people become very good filters. And the only thing that really gets through are things that are kind of fall outside of that filter, like either in places that they're not expected, or in ways that just speak to them either in like a really heartwarming way or a way that kind of gets through that, can get past that. So this is something that we did on college campuses, and we just took over some dorm room washing machines, with the cutout and dramatizing. Like, this is a little different than the toilet one. It's not about scaring people about you never know where you have to go. This is just sort of bringing to life what it feels like when you have an upset stomach and how we Pepto can help make it better. And think about, I don't know if you guys remember this, I mean some people in the room probably do, but Pepto-Bismol used to always be very, very functional. It was like that purple liquid, and it was that stuff in your grandmother's house, and you're just like, it's kind of gross and it was kind of old. And this campaign that we built is a way to try to modernize that a bit. Thermacare. I love Thermacare, and like I said, it was sold this year to another company. So no longer working on it. We're all very, very sad. It was like this little engine that could. It was like this. Like I said, the product was ugly, looked like a diaper or looked like a bandage, and it was awful. It was one of those products that P&G developed because they had the technology, and they developed this technology of this coal that you put something else in it, and then the byproduct of it when it was exposed to oxygen was heat. And they're like, what am I going to do with this? And then they thought, oh, let's put it in a bandage and create a wrap. Created the category. It was the first thing on the market 5 years ago to do this, because before that people either had to have like ice packs or coal packs or a plug-in electrical thing. So it was pretty revolutionary at the time. It was very quickly copied by a lot of private label brands, which were significantly cheaper. And so we wanted to do something that was going to shake things up a little bit. And this is around the launch of a new product line, which was Thermacare menstrual wraps. So you're thinking like, oh God, Thermacare is bad enough, but now it's a menstrual pad. And you're like, how are we going to talk about that? And we started thinking about it, and through some of the research that P&G did, in one of the focus groups, there was a whole conversation with some of the women about, you know what, when I get it really, really bad, and no one knows it, and they think I'm just making it up, and people think that I'm not in as much pain as I am, especially the men. I wish men would be able to have this, and then they would know. And we're like, oh, interesting. Let's see what we can play with that. And so I need to switch gears actually and run this off a different thing. But this is part of the campaign that came out of that, the Thermacare menstrual wraps, and it's called Men with Cramps. And this one of all things, actually, I'll spill the beans beforehand, but we won like a big advertising award for this, and it just shows like, come up with something that's a little bit odd, and sometimes things work. And their sound comes in a little bit later.
Men, are you suffering from menstrual cramps? Guess what? You're not a guy!
Sex sells has always been a mantra in advertising, but these days companies are going for something a little different, secretly planting edgy and off-the-wall ads disguised as entertainment, hoping that they'll be adopted and spread virally across the web. Procter & Gamble, the world's largest consumer products company, known for its squeaky clean ad campaigns, shelled out $1 million to create edgy entertainment to build buzz for its menstrual cramp heating pad, a Men with Cramps parody viral campaign to compete for YouTube eyeballs. P&G secretly planted a fake documentary about men with cramps and a parody website on a medical study by ad firm Publicis, producing the kind of humor you'd never expect from P&G.
It is invisible. It is silent. Yet its firm monthly grasp has determined battles, destroyed empires, and deeply shaped the human experience. It has humbled giants, and directly or indirectly caused some of the most important events in our history. Yet for centuries, these men have agonized in an embarrassed silence.
My name is Dr. Gerhard Fartmann. I'm currently studying cyclical non-uterine dysmenorrhea, commonly known as male menstrual cramps, male cramps, male cramps.
In the viral media space and the internet, you really have an opportunity to have people be media vehicles for you. And so what you want to do is try to get people to become curious about it and spread the news. If you give the answer away too quickly, they tend to shy away from sharing it with their friends.
P&G didn't mention the product name in the videos for months, letting the low-key approach inspire 11 million downloads and visits to the fake site, even getting attention from Jay Leno and in the blogosphere, to generate buzz that feels authentic without the huge cost of traditional TV ads.
And originally they had come to us, they had a $1 million budget, and they were expecting stuff that was going to be fairly traditional, like, for $1 million, I guess maybe we can do like a DR spot, when DR is those things that run late at night, like call 1-800, whatever. Or maybe we can do a print ad. And again, that little piece, that little nugget that we heard from some women talking about their bad menstrual pain led to this. And so there was no TV. There was no print. The way that we did it was, again, started with a fake classified ad that led people to a website. We created a fake documentary, which is just hysterical. Like the full one was really hysterical. So a lot of it was through PR for the first 3 months, and then we launched the Thermacare menstrual website, and the fake website became the real website after that.
Before we go on, let's have another round of applause. So thank you for bringing those to share. And now why don't you tell us a little bit about what the greatest challenges were when you were coming up with, or when your company was coming up with some of those things?
There's always a lot of challenges. I mean, the advertising business, and also I think it's the same way in entertainment and TV, if you're dealing with something which is essentially a creative exercise, there's no real right answer. And so there's always a lot of self-doubt, and you're always trying to kind of find your way and try to find trying to do things that can at least point you in the right direction. And I think part of my role at an agency is like basically to take people like David, who's the creative director, and point him in the right direction. But you do that by, yeah, doing your homework in terms of media research. You find out as much as you can about the product and what it actually does. You try it out. Didn't try this particular one, but I tried the other ones. And the people, and get a sense of like who we think is, we might want to be targeting and who we might want to be talking to, and try to get to know them as well as possible. And at least that that narrows it down a little bit. And then it's a kind of a big kind of creative, everyone coming up with ideas, and then kind of trying to see where they flow. And this was one of the ones that, once we started with this idea, it just made perfect sense. Like, oh my God, this is like so hysterical. Then we're thinking, well, P&G is never going to buy it. Like, there's no way. Like P&G, home of like good, warm-hearted Cincinnati, middle America, and kudos to Meredith, who was the brand manager on it. And also, I think because it's a smaller brand within P&G, that they were willing to do a little bit. People weren't paying as much attention. They weren't minding the store as much as probably they should have been. And so we were able to kind of get it in that way. But I would say the biggest and toughest piece is there's certainly convincing people of the value of the idea, getting people excited. And then each of these things require not just our organization, but a lot of specialty what they call partner agencies, like PR agencies, the media buying companies, you've got the brand managers, and it's one of those things where there's a lot of people have to say yes for this to be able to happen. And I think that was one of the surprises. You talk about surprises when I got into the industry. The amount of cajoling, politicking, framing of arguments, and trying to push stuff through. There's lots of people who can say no. Everyone can say no, not everyone can say yes. And so that's probably the toughest part. The idea, and then trying to get it through the process so that it actually comes out the other side looking like you intended.
So something like the Thermacare campaign that you just showed us, you alluded to the fact that something like that could not have happened just a few years before. So what are some of the other trends that you see happening, and how do you see that changing what you do?
Yeah, again, the biggest thing is just, as I mentioned before, the proliferation of ways of talking to people, and the extra work that you have to do to get their attention. I mean, this is kind of again, for 3 months, we were out there talking to people. They didn't really know what we were about. That's one of the ways that you can do it, is trying to get people to build excitement. And I think trying to manage that is the biggest, is the biggest challenge. I mean, because no one can be. It used to be you could be an expert in TV, or people were experts in radio, people were experts in print, and now you have to have some facility in pretty much everything. Like maybe I'm not an expert in the digital space or the PR space, but you have to have at least an understanding of how that works. So you become a bit more. You might have an expertise in one area, but you have to have a general knowledge in a lot of different areas to at least be able to think that this kind of thing is even possible. I mean, that's part of it, is showing that this is possible. And then with those changes, everyone's trying to scramble to figure it all out. Nobody really has answers to much. And so you have, for something like this, you might have 15 organizations that are all kind of bumping up next to each other. No one exactly knows how it's all going to work. And trying to figure out how to make it work is probably one of the biggest changes. Again, it used to be really simple. It used to be the creative agency, and then you had media buyers. That's all you had. The creative agency did they did the copy, they made the ads, and then you had people who called up 4 networks, 5 networks, maybe a couple side networks in the pre-cable days. They called them up, made a deal, everything was done. Now you've just got so many different options and so many different ways of doing stuff. Like we're working on this one campaign now, and can't tell you who it's for, but it's really actually pretty cool. One of the ideas that we have is a combination of submitting photographs, and there's a certain brand idea that we have for this one client. What is your vision of this? Submit that, and then within a month or two, with their permission, they actually become part of the billboards in their city that they live in, which is kind of neat. And then creating this really interesting virtual environment of all those stories and all those images where people can navigate, and then creating events based upon what they're talking about. And then like all these really great ambient things like rock climbing walls, and like basically the ads start popping up out of structures. And so those are, but again, those are all just kind of ideas that are coming, we never would have done probably 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago.
So, last 2 questions, and then we'll open up to your questions. First, what are your own next steps career-wise? And second, what advice would you have for anyone in the audience who's interested in following in your footsteps?
Next step career-wise, having a blast, want to keep doing what I'm doing. Advertising is great, but I also love entertainment. It seems that the path that I've chosen is either some kind of combination of analytics. There's always been some kind of analytic part, to the work that I've done, whether it be in finance or whatever. And then adding in sort of pop culture, entertainment, some kind of creative culture piece. Those seem to be the pieces that I'm interested in, and that's probably where my career will keep going. I would love to find a way at some point to do that 4 days a week as opposed to 5 or 6 or 7. But for now, I think I'm in a pretty good. I'm liking what I'm doing, so I'm trying to keep doing more of this stuff.
And for those who'd like to enter the field, what would you suggest?
I think there's it depends on what your passion is. I mean, I guess I didn't explain in a creative advertising agency. First of all, there's tons of different types of agencies and media services firms. I would say there's the 3 main components are the creative agencies. You've got the media agencies, which are kind of an outgrowth of the traditional buying departments. Buying media, having relationships with digital, online, radio, print, TV companies, who also do communication and campaign planning. And then you've got this comms planning function, which is a new outgrowth. It's only in the last 5 years that this function has even existed. And it's because with the proliferation of all these different types of media, you need somebody to figure out what's the best way, or what do we think is the best way to actually go to market and to create a campaign. So you have functions, comms planning functions in the media group, media companies. Sometimes there's comms planning functions for the independent companies. But those are the 3 kind of rough areas. The media areas, if you're really, really hardcore into analytics and media, the media space is a really good place to be. Same thing with comms planning. The creative side, you've got people like me who are probably more kind of half creative, half analytic, and then you've got the pure creatives. And so if you want to get into that space, if you actually want to make the ads, I think showing some interest in creativity, having done some training in design work, art direction, copywriting, because there's both copy and the visuals, that all helps. So usually most of the people that are on the creative side have had some sort of training in a creative field. There's my side, which is more the analytics. Some of us come from research backgrounds. Some of us come from, we have some anthropologists, some people who were cultural trend maker, people who predict trends. So basically anybody who's sort of interested in the way that culture works, whether you had formal training or not, I think that can lead into a strategy or plan in place. And then you've also got account services. If you like to sell, if you are a good salesperson, the account people are they're the Don Drapers, the whiners, the diners, the ones who, or at least they try to think that they're Don Draper, the ones who are taking people out and finding out what their business needs are and trying to get us in there. So I think depending on what you're interested in and what you're good at, there's different paths, but there's sort of creative, there's analytic, and there's sales are the 3 buckets that I would think of.
So we're going to open it up to your questions now, but first let us tell him thank you so much for everything. Sorry, so your first question right here.
Talk a little, if you will, please, about how you utilize the print media. You talked a lot about television, and how important is it to still be a good writer?
pretty critical. Although print, more and more what I'm seeing is it used to be that print was the place that you explained everything before the digital, before the online place, before the web. Print was where you got all the, where you would write all the copy, where you would explain what the product did. More and more, the print is, the print medium is about very specific, kind of high impact visuals, stuff that kind of grabs people's attention and gets their interest. And then you do a lot of the explaining on the web. So what it does, in the print space, rather than writing lots and lots of copy, the copies become quite a bit shorter. And because it's become shorter, it's actually much more important. Like every single word matters. Like you might only have 2 words on a page. Maybe you have 3 or 4. And the ability to craft the essence of what you're trying to communicate in 2, 3, 4 words is a lot harder than you would think. I mean, it's something that I could never do. So it's become a bit more precise. The large volume of copy is largely on the web now. But the print medium, I think we're using mostly for very high impact, very specific, very high impact. And that's what the people who are doing print are also doing billboards, like bus shelters, a lot of the big billboards. And it's all about economy of words and precision in that space.
You spoke about market research versus academic research and how they're worlds apart. So my question is, you're somebody who spans both worlds. You go into an ad agency where most people don't have PhDs. Yeah. What's it like, being somebody who has a PhD in an agency? Is it valued? Or do you feel your PhD is valuable? Talk a little bit about being in both worlds.
I think again, it's interesting. It's almost like a commercial in some ways. It depends on who's receiving the message. In some places, and with some people, if you say you have a PhD, they automatically think, okay, you're in this little world that's kind of divorced from reality. Other people, and so therefore, I'm not sure if I should trust what you say. Other people will, know that what comes with that, especially people who've been through graduate training themselves, know that what it gives you is a sense of rigor, and it gives you a sense of confidence that the methods that you're given certain questions, the methods that you're using to deploy that are probably going to be pretty sound, and then you're going to have a lot more ingenuity in terms of how you answer questions, and how you go about doing stuff. And that was the case at MTV Networks. MTV Networks had probably one of the preeminent media entertainment research groups in the industry. And I had a doctorate, my first boss had a doctorate. Most everyone in the group had at least a master's or above. And we had 3 or 4 people who had PhDs there. And you don't walking in and when people find out that you have a PhD, it's not all of a sudden like, oh, But what it does is I think it just gives you flexibility and rigor, and it gives you ability to have an understanding of the research process in a way that other people probably don't.
You said earlier that a lot of advertising is emotional, like people don't care about percentage points and stuff like that on credit cards, for example. How does that segue into today's commercials in reference to the politicians, in reference to the people running for president? Do people want more emotional side on that, or do they want more functionality or practicalness in that? And just if you could talk a little bit about that.
I guess I'll amend my comment further. We're looking at TV, print, billboards, that type of stuff. It's all emotional. But there is a role, especially for new products, like when the menstrual wraps came out, like for a little bit more detail. And there are places for that. And again, it used to be print, but it's largely the online space right now where that kind of stuff happens. And if you think about Citibank on TV, it's all big and it's emotional and it's heartwarming. But if you go onto their website, you can still find out what's the percentage rate, how much I'm going to earn. Let me compare the cards. So I think in different media, especially in the online space, you can get more precise. Political stuff, you guys, we're in Annenberg, you guys know a hell of a lot more than I do about that. But the TV stuff that I've seen, and the way that I've seen them constructing their campaigns is actually remarkably similar to the way that we would. You go on the websites, that's where all the policy papers are, that's where all the information is, that's where all the detail is, that's where all like the real information is. If you go on the TV or the radio, it's pretty, I would say it's pretty emotional. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's emotional the wrong way, sometimes it's completely misleading and it's lies. But they, it seems like they're appealing much more in the TV space to the emotional kind of like either fear or joy or possibility or uncertainty. And then it's the web space that you end up tend to getting a little more. I will say though that having worked on Procter & Gamble, we have much stricter truthfulness requirements than we cannot get this stuff. We cannot get anything through the legal department that is not. It has to be clinically proven. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can't say that we can't say. Sorry, you be the partner.
We're about to decide. Okay, straight.
Hi, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the analytics component of some of those creative guys, particularly the ThermaWrap.
Right.
ThermaCare brand. You said you started with $1 million. You created this mostly digital PR campaign. When you started that campaign, were there certain types of hard goals that they wanted to hit in terms of impressions or sales revenues? I'm just curious from and being a purely creative ad, what are the analytic drivers?
The ultimate goals were sales goals, which is ultimately that's kind of what you're trying to do. Sometimes you'll have some clients who, over the course of the campaign, like maybe they have a continuous survey that's going along in terms of where they measure what percent of the population's heard of it, what do they think about it, do they like it, do they not like it. So sometimes the goals are to move those numbers. For ThermaCare, it was basically just to sell product, and we had certain goals we wanted to meet there. On this one, we did not have impression goals because this was something which we had no idea if it was going to work. We had never done anything like this before. P&G had never done anything like this before. So a lot of the traditional metrics that they've developed over the course of 30 and 40 years didn't really apply. I mean, a lot of these large companies who have, P&G is the largest marketer in the world. I don't know the number, but I think they spend something like $3 or $4 billion a year on marketing, which is a lot of money. And that's globally. They have, when you spend that much money and you have that many products, thousands and thousands of products in pretty much every country on the planet. In order to manage that, they've created systems that, for the most part, like marketing has to go through this process, and each step of the way, like you're doing a TV ad, when you're about halfway there, you have to test it. You can only move forward if it meets certain metrics, and then when you find, when you have go up to final production, you test it again, and you have to meet certain metrics, and then those metrics go into sales forecasts that determine the budget for the next year and what their success criteria for the next year. So it's this whole big analytic machine in places like P&G and the Unilevers of the world, these large consumer packaged goods companies. So if we had been working on Nyquil and we're doing a TV ad, we could never say, well, we don't want to do a TV ad, we're going to do something like this. The benefit of working on a very small brand that people were not paying much attention to was that you could actually do something. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, the purpose of the ads is to sell the product.
Yeah.
Did these ads that you showed us sell the product?
Absolutely. This, and I'm not speaking out of school, this is public knowledge, so I'm not saying any secrets. There had been a 2-year decline, year-on-year decline. They were, because of the increase in private label, on average, sales were decreasing about 7% a year, and that's not good. We were able to go from -7 to flat, which isn't increasing, but at least we kind of stemmed the loss. So that was good. So sometimes success doesn't mean that you're really gaining; it's stemming losses. So that actually worked for us as well. Sure, you choose.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the best brands in the world are great because they listen to their customer. my question, I think, is when you are listening to the customer in focus groups and kind of informal settings, are there any tricks, do you think, to distilling the general consumer just noise and to kind of finding those nuggets of wisdom, you know, like you played upon, you know, the, oh, I wish men had cramps. Are there any tricks to kind of honing in on what's golden?
I would say, I would define listen as broader than focus groups, certainly, because focus groups can be, everyone knows the problems that they can have. You take people, first of all, how do you find the people? Who's going to be willing to give up their Thursday night, even if it is for $50 or $70, and you put them in this great room with a big window. They have their purpose, and I use them a lot, but I think you need to listen to people in the greatest variety of ways possible. Like sometimes it's through focus groups, sometimes it's through surveys. I call that listening. Sometimes it's through observation, seeing what people are doing and getting inspiration that way. Sometimes it's feedback. We try to push organizations, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, to have multiple ways for people to provide feedback every time that they experience some communication about them. So maybe it's a quick response code on a billboard, like some cell phones, and then you can take a picture and go immediately to a website. Find some way to know if people are reacting to the stuff and what are they thinking about it, what are they thinking about the brand, and being able to call that together. And the second piece is just don't listen to everything that they say. You ask anyone you put somebody in a room for an hour and a half, or you ask them a question over the phone, they're going to give you an answer. It's not always the right answer. It's not something that they always put their a lot of thought into. And quite honestly, if you put too much thought into something, you might end up in a place where you wouldn't otherwise if you weren't thinking about it. Most people, when they see ads or where they experience communication, are not really thinking about it. As much time as I spend thinking about Nyquil and how great it is about quelling your symptoms so you get a good night's rest so you can have a great day tomorrow, most people aren't. They're sick, they don't want to think about it, they're at the store, or they're thinking, whatever, they just need to feel better. So you just have to kind of take your experience as well. Like, over time you get more experience, you know what to listen to and what not to. But those clarifying moments, again, that when they said, if no one knows how to paint about the painted, especially guys, if they only knew, a little light went off, because it just felt like, okay, I can do something with this, I can grab around this. Spike TV, there was a similar moment where we were doing a lot of kind of research into guys' lives. And my boss's boss, who was the network president, he was in one of the groups, and the only thing that he wrote down was when one of the guys introduced himself, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Dwayne, I live in Fort Worth, I'm a fifth-year senior." And he wrote down fifth-year senior. He's like, "That's an idea for a show." And so like, they're going to be developing a show called Fifth-Year Senior. Yeah. So little ideas like that come in a variety of different.
Last one you pick. Last one.
Oh,
To what degree do you feel like advertising and marketing industry is trying to co-opt Web 2.0 and user-generated content impulses that seem to be pretty emergent in culture right now?
Co-opt, I would actually say, yeah. I mean, the anywhere people are. I mean, the advertising industry is going to find a way to be where people are. And where people are, it costs money to produce, and so they're going to need to find the source of funding. So I think those partnerships are going to happen. I mean, Facebook for the longest time said no way to ads, and then got really, really huge, and the numbers that people started throwing at the people who ran it got a lot bigger and a lot more tempting. And now you have it's not tons of ads, but those little things that you send people, those are more often than not, those are not things that people just thought up in their basement and sent out to the world. They're usually things that are paid for. Google and YouTube the same way. YouTube started as this sort of very weird, Wild West place. When you start getting millions, then hundreds of millions, then billions of views, people take notice. And YouTube was bought by a major media, it's bought by Google. So now they're in the process of really trying to monetize that as well. But doing it in a way that is true to their original. When I say being true to the brand, YouTube is, in many ways, is a brand. There's people who are obsessed with creating content and putting it out there. They want to become the next YouTube star. And partly it's about fame, but partly it's just about recognition and a pat on the back from other people within what they call a YouTube community. And that group of people, they cross-post with each other, they link to each other, and so you can't do anything. If you start spoiling that, you're going to basically kill the reason that a lot of people are interested in it, which is the traffic. So what Google's trying to do is find ways of monetizing it, but in a way that is not going to piss off the people with the Wild West mentality that first started it. So you'll see if you go there, they actually have one whole section which is specifically for brands. Oreos have a page, Doritos has a page, where a lot of their contests are run out of. They segregate it so that the people that are in the main part of it don't get mad. But quite honestly, a lot of the people fling the flow back and forth. I think that's one of the ways that they're doing it. Yeah, so Web 3.0, any way of talking to people, or where people are communicating with each other, the safest bet is that eventually people in the commercial world will start trying to find ways of inserting themselves into it.
So with that, I would like to thank...
That sounded scarier than I intended to be, sorry.
Maybe we'll end on more up note. We'll end on the up note of the fact that Dr. David Gleason came and shared his expertise with us. So on behalf of the Annenberg School of Communication, Penn Alumni Diversity Alliance, Penn Gale and Alumni Relations, we would like to thank you very much for coming.